This is the Andre Segovia Show.
Hey everyone, I'm going to get to the interview here in a moment. My guests today are HKIA targeter Sarah Superbad Adams and Benghazi survivor and hero Dave Boon Benton. Now, they have been on my program before. Collectively, together, they've been on my show 3 times. Individually, this is their 4th appearance, so they're no stranger to the program, and older audience members should already be familiar with them. But for those of you that are new, in the video description down below, there should be links to my previous conversations with them. I don't want to retread some of that territory because we already talked about it. And of course, if you're familiar with these guests, then you'll know that Sarah has been doing a lot of press lately. I don't want to dive deep into stuff that she's already covered on as well. So I'm more interested in getting you the pertinent information that you should know about certain things that your own government is doing or not doing that you should be made aware of. But it's also building on all the other conversations that we had before. So the first time they appeared on my program was 2 years ago when they published their book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Their last appearance together, we did an entire live react and fact check to 13 Hours, the Secret Soldiers of Benghazi movie by Michael Bay. Yeah, that's exclusively on Rumble. You're not going to find it anywhere else. Links in the video description down below. And for those of you listening to the podcast, you know the drill. All these links will be available in the show notes accompany this episode at theandresegovia.com. Now, let's just dive right into the interview with Sarah Adams and Dave Benton. It's been 23 years almost since 9/11. It's been 12 years since Benghazi. It's been 3 years since Abbey Gate. It's been 2 years since publishing Know Thy Enemy, and nearly a year since the Hamas attacks, and just over a month since Trump was nearly assassinated. This year alone has been absolutely bonkers. Did you ever see yourself seeing that Americans would be sympathizing with Osama bin Laden and his letter out there and say, hey, we agree with this guy?
No, not at all.
23 years ago, we had people, particularly on that side of the aisle, saying that this was an inside job. And now they're saying, hey, yeah, but Osama bin Laden was right. It's like, wait, you can't have it both ways. That's just not how it is. But that is the state of where we are today. And it's made this conversation a lot more difficult to get out there with people being that either ignorant or closed off to any of this. The both of you published your book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. It's right over my shoulder here. And that was a cold case investigation into Benghazi. There's been a lot of updates since then. Man, I don't even know where to begin with that. But what is the state of Libya today? Let's start with that. What is the state of Libya today?
I mean, Libya's in a really tough spot because, you know, they really need to put in, you know, some sort of democratic governing structure, but there's a lot of outside forces, right? There's our government, there's NATO, there's Turkish government, right? There's the Russians, there's the Emiratis, there's the Qataris. So there's all these outside influences trying to affect their elections, and they basically have a prime minister right now who's supposed to be stepping down as elections kick off and they're getting new leaders, and he isn't, and he's starting little wars among the militias. And so, yeah, they're in a real bad state right now. There's been a lot of deaths just in the last month from some of this infighting. And, you know, they're on the right pathway to make this happen, but there are a few bad actors in the way preventing it from moving forward.
You also have to remember, too, that Libya is still a divided country.
But is it divided in the sense that the general audience might be familiar with Mogadishu in Somalia? It was like a bunch of warlords fighting, and it's like, is there really a government? In the case of Libya, is it something like Somalia here?
It's like two governments. It's almost like East and West Germany.
Oh, okay. All right, and who's the prime minister? Because who's Haftar?
So Haftar is basically one of the key leaders. He runs the military in the Eastern government, and then the Western government is Dubaiba is the prime minister.
And which one is more friendly to the Democratic allies?
Well, so the prime minister is the one allied with the U.S. government, but remember, he's the one also allied with Al-Qaeda, and especially the Al-Qaeda's leadership who are based in Misrata, Libya. And then General Haftar is the one fighting Al-Qaeda, but he's the one not aligned with the U.S. government because the U.S. government went in and forbid American companies from working with him years ago. And he actually then was forced to work with Russia's Wagner group. So that obviously makes him an enemy of ours. So we're on the wrong side. And then we force the right side to join the bad side. So it's basically a failed U.S. policy mess.
It's a slightly biased opinion, but you could say that Haftar is more for the Libyan people.
Yeah, so the prime minister, his family, they're very famous, the Biba family. If you actually remember the Swiss leaks, and it was all the leaks of all the rich, corrupt people around the world that moved their money to Switzerland. So his family, there's a lot of reports of his family, basically money that they siphoned off and stole from the Libyan people. And they did a lot of it through different economic like in building and infrastructure projects. And so, they'd collect the money and then put like 20% into the project. And we actually saw this. I don't know if this is a project they worked on, but, when basically it was called a Medicane, it's just the hurricane, and it's how they use the term if it's in the Mediterranean. So one hit eastern Libya and it hit the city of Darna, and actually their dams weren't built to code because of corruption and these corrupt practices. And a very large numbers of people died. It was actually a very horrible situation. So, this corruption isn't just about stealing money, right? I mean, it really damages people's lives.
Yes. No, man, that's awful. But it's also, that shows in a nutshell, U.S. foreign policy. And it's, well, let me throw some names at you, and you tell me if they're considered, or the official position of the United States is that they're terror organizations. Hamas. Let's start with low-hanging fruit here. Terror organization?
Hamas has been designated as a terror organization for more than 25 years now, but we do have persons in our Congress who don't believe that. So it is one of those interesting issues. So the U.S. government for many years now gives aid to the Hamas government. So we have been giving money directly to Hamas, which is a terrorist organization.
And Hezbollah.
Hezbollah is obviously a designated terrorist organization, most famously known for our 1983 Beirut marine bombings.
And, well, another one. Everybody knows this one. Al-Qaeda. And
yes, even though don't you want you to believe Al-Qaeda still exists? Al-Qaeda's grown, and they're very powerful, and they're up to 50,000 members now, which is so much larger than in 2001.
That was the most mind-blowing fact I heard that you dropped on the Resilient podcast. I'm like, 50,000? Okay. ISIS. I think that's pretty much straightforward. Taliban.
Yeah, so the U.S. policy is the Taliban's a political organization, and right now we're aligned with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and we send both humanitarian dollars to them and counterterrorism dollars.
If you look at the definition of terrorism, though, they are terrorists.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Which then leads me to this question. How different is Taliban from the government of Iran?
They're no different. They're no different from the government of Iran. They're no different from ISIS. They're no different from Al-Qaeda. Actually, they're completely married into Al-Qaeda. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda, they're the exact same organization because for 20 years they've been marrying each other, and now they're all family.
My goodness. Iran, as people probably know or should know, is they fund Hamas and Hezbollah directly.
Yeah, but Iran is also right now working with the Taliban, and they're doing actually something very interesting. They're helping the Taliban to innovate on weapons that the Taliban can put uranium on.
And I remember that it was the United States under Obama that gave money to Iran in what is called the Iran deal, so they can develop the nuclear energy with the promise they won't use it for a bomb.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not: a comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This deal demonstrates that American diplomacy can bring about real and meaningful change that makes our country and the world safer and more secure. This deal is also in line with a tradition of American leadership. It's now more than 50 years since President Kennedy stood before the American people and said, Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. He was speaking then about the need for discussions between the United States and the Soviet Union, which led to efforts to restrict the spread of nuclear weapons. In those days, the risk was a catastrophic nuclear war between two superpowers. In our time, the risk is that nuclear weapons will spread to more and more countries, particularly in the Middle East, the most volatile region in our world. Today, because America negotiated from a position of strength and principle, we have stopped the spread of nuclear weapons in this region. Because of this deal, the international community will be able to verify that the Islamic Republic of Iran will not develop a nuclear weapon. This deal meets every single one of the bottom lines that we established when we achieved a framework earlier this spring. Every pathway to a nuclear weapon is cut off, and the inspection and transparency regime necessary to verify that objective will be put in place. Because of this deal, Iran will not produce the highly enriched uranium and weapons-grade plutonium that form the raw materials necessary for a nuclear bomb.
Well, they're helping Taliban figure out how to use uranium, so I don't think they kept their promises.
Yeah. Okay. That's basically an overview of how I had put up a picture of, after the Hamas attacks and the retaliatory strikes that Israel was doing too. But it was a picture of all these missiles going up in the air, and the tagline says "U.S. tax dollars," and these other ones coming over to intercept them, and it says somehow our U.S. tax dollars.
Very factual.
But people hear numbers thrown out with respects to how much we've given to Taliban, not to mention the stuff that was left there. But, my goodness, I don't even know if I should start with Abbey Gate first. But we'll talk about Abbey Gate after. But Taliban, however, they were technically the government of Afghanistan before we went in.
For a very short period of time, they were only the government of Afghanistan for about 4 years ever. And so this is a real misconception in the American public. The American public think, oh, they were the government of Afghanistan, Afghans want them. No, they were in the government a very short time. 9/11 happened, and we took them over. So this is not like the preferred government of the Afghan people. It never was.
After the Russians left, there were civil wars in Afghanistan, and there were a bunch of warlords. Well, out of that came the Taliban, which attempted to bring some type of stability to Afghanistan, but it didn't work very effectively.
And oh my goodness, his name escapes me right now. That interview that Sean Ryan did with Mahmoud, was it?
Yeah, Ahmad Massoud. Yeah, so his father was Ahmad Shah Massoud.
Yeah, and he was trying to tip us off as to what bin Laden was intending to do, and he was probably the first, if I'm not mistaken, killed in a car bombing in Kabul.
Well, no, he actually, the really interesting thing is Al-Qaeda set up a fake interview with him, and the bomb was in the camera, and the basically the two suicide bombers were the interviewers, and they blew themselves up with the bomb.
To take him out, and then 9/11 shortly thereafter. But
the person who provided those two suicide bombers, Saifullah Hassan, he's Tunisian, and he provided attackers also to our 2012 Benghazi attacks.
And that's why I highlighted how we started this conversation off and how everything is connected, because with all this intertwining that's happening, the global war on terror, like what does Benghazi do with Iraq or Afghanistan, or what did they have anything to do with 9/11 and things like that? It's very convoluted in all this, because some people, Americans, argue it's like, well, if we went after all of these other places, why did we not first go after Saudi Arabia when it was the Saudi Arabians that were mostly the terrorists in 9/11? Is the mastermind of 9/11 Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was he Saudi Arabian?
No, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was actually a Kuwaiti Pakistani. Also, the Saudi Arabians he recruited are the ones who wanted to attack the government of Saudi Arabia and take down the monarchy of Saudi Arabia. So the 9/11 attackers that were Saudi were enemies of the Saudi government. I feel like that gets completely lost on the American people.
It's actually the first time I hear anybody clarify that. So with all this and seeing that we are funding both sides, how then do you take this that, well, we deserved it? 9/11 was deserved. We brought it upon ourselves.
I don't think anyone deserves to be, murdered. You could say that some of our policies might have contributed to what happened, but we definitely didn't deserve it. No victim deserves to be murdered. Our policies do cause problems for us in the future. And we kind of have like a short-term mindset where we're like, hey, we'll work with this group, even though we know this group is bad, to achieve a near-term objective, not realizing the implications it might have 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Right. And remember, basically, Osama bin Laden was on our side when we supported the Mujahideen. So, his issues with us are odd, right? Because he actually basically got resources from us. And then even in Libya in 2012, when we supported the Libyan revolution, we also supported Al-Qaeda in the Libyan revolution, right? So it is really odd that these terrorists will take benefits from us, and then they say they want to kill all of us and attack us, right? Like the Taliban is one of the biggest beneficiaries of U.S. government right now because infidels. Like, it's ironic, right? Just how two-faced they are.
Yeah.
Something that terrorists do very well, not only terrorists, all of our enemies do it very well. They use our moral policies against us.
Yeah. That has been one of the major problems for why we're like, well, we don't, maybe through a strategy of diplomacy or appeasement, we'll get them to side with us. But the reason I ask, like, with people like thinking that, oh, we brought it upon ourselves, is because of how much has shifted. Like, they call it pro-Palestinian protests that we've seen in the United States lately. No, they've been pro-Hamas, and that's what. Just because we, in my case, denouncing the pro-Hamas protest doesn't mean I am advocating for all the policies that Israel does. I can't say that everything that Israel's ever done is a positive thing, but they are a sovereign state. They deserve to defend themselves. And in a situation like this, where they got attacked in the way they were, like, yes, questions about it for sure. But aside from that, why is nobody talking about the hostages that these guys still have? And despite all these other ceasefire agreements that are being talked about, and they walk away from these, they don't even show up to them. They just say we don't accept them. Do you know how many Americans they're still holding hostage?
Yeah, they believe there's still 8 Americans alive in Hamas custody.
And I know they still have a handful of other Israeli citizens hostage, and they just recently
have about
recovered some of the bodies.
100 assessed to potentially be alive for Israeli citizens.
Yeah, and I think as we record this, it's been like a couple of weeks or maybe a week ago where they recovered a few of the bodies that they found.
And today they rescued a gentleman, a Muslim Israeli, an older gentleman.
I did see that in The Wire. The IDF did that. Like, wow. And that's forgotten in that whole conversation too. Why are they still holding hostages?
And that one was really interesting because a lot of the hostages they rescued have been in apartments, but he was actually in a tunnel.
Interesting. Yeah, man, it's just there's so much, and it's, even though it feels like we're kind of globetrotting and all this, it always feels like it comes down to basically how we all met, and it's about Benghazi. It's not taken seriously. It's looked upon as just a political football for political gain for either side. And in one of your other interviews, and you could share this with my audience, how many terrorists did you mention are believed to have crossed the border from some of these other countries where they've been committing terrorism and in some way connected to the Benghazi attackers?
Well, the number I shared on Chad's show, the 1,500, that's not international terrorists. That 1,500 is just the assessment of terrorists I believe have come from Afghanistan. So goodness. The number of terrorists could be much larger than that.
And those terrorists coming from Afghanistan, is that the Haqqani network?
It's a mix of things. Some are Haqqani networks, some are ISIS, some are Al-Qaeda, and then some are just other groups like the Tajik groups, the Uzbek groups, Pakistani groups, etc., and then obviously Iranian terrorists too. So there's a whole mix of people training in Afghanistan and then deploying outwards.
And because I brought up Haqqani, I might as well bring this part up, because what y'all have been doing for, what is it, at least just over halfway now, right? With your Haqqani month, shedding the truth about things. Well, tell people that are not familiar with this Haqqani month thing that you're doing, why and what it is and why.
Might take it for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we're taunting the Haqqanis, trying to elicit a reaction from them. We want them to know that we do know that they're terrorists and that something will be done about it.
Yeah, and it came about because we've been told numerous times now from friends of ours that different Republican members of Congress have reached out to them and said, tone down your rhetoric on the Haqqanis, tone down your rhetoric on the Taliban. And by the time it came to us again, and it was a congressman who's very publicly anti-Taliban resistance, we're like, screw this. We're just going to start leaking the information we have on the Haqqanis. And so we've been doing it now for 2 weeks. And as you saw yesterday, we leaked the biggest piece, the fact that they jointly planned the Abbey Gate attacks with ISIS.
We won't name names right now, but this does come from veterans of the GWAT as well, which is very painful to hear someone who's been in our shoes and say, hey, tone this down.
Yeah. And
so in typical fashion, we're like, well, we'll just amplify it louder.
And sadly, it's even, when a war was going on, a lot of money was going to Afghanistan, and people didn't really keep their morals about them. But there's still a lot of money going to Afghanistan, right? And people are still benefiting from it. And as long as we don't follow the money and we allow things like corruption, we're going to have, people that you think are doing the right thing, and they're not. They're doing the right things for themselves and their pocketbooks. And funding terrorism is actually financially benefit a lot of times to people.
Mm-hmm. And as you highlighted in previous conversations, it's not like it's $1 going from this side to that other side. It's laundered through so many different things, but eventually ends up that way. It's just like, well, yeah, the Bleeding Hearts wanted to address the famine that was happening in Somalia. But when you have warlords intercepting all that, you're not giving them anything. If anything, the warlords weaponized hunger because of it, and that's how we ended up with Black Hawk Down. Or at least that's how we all remember it. But
right, and it's how the Houthis took over huge swaths of Yemen. Same type of thing, same exact.
Yeah, and it's so simple, and still, I imagine we're still sending money over there too. Like, I'm of the opinion, end all foreign aid. We have our own problems here, and we're going to collapse under the weight of our own debt. And California, that's just even more ridiculous here. But back to Afghanistan. So Haqqani, for those that are unaware, because most people just relate to some names, but they can't even find it on the freaking map. Even if it was in 42 font, they won't be able to find it. So who is Haqqani to Afghanistan?
Sure. Do you want to talk about the father quickly, and then?
No, I'll let you do it.
Okay, so basically, the father, Jalaluddin Haqqani, was one of the original Mujahideen leaders. That's one of the people the U.S. backed, right, in the war against the Soviet Union. Even the family's bunker in Pakistan we built, right? So that's kind of where we got introduced to the Haqqanis. And then, of course, when we went in after 9/11, the Haqqanis, were no longer allied with the United States, and the Haqqanis basically became the major targeting and then suicide branch of the Taliban that would attack U.S. Forces. So Jalaluddin's passed now, but his son ended up taking over the organization, which we call the Haqqani Network, Sirajuddin Haqqani. And Sirajuddin alone sent 1,050 suicide bombers, just him, wow, at U.S. troops over the course, of the GWAT. So he's very dangerous. He's killed probably more American troops than any terrorist on earth, to be honest. Maybe Qasem Soleimani could have beat him, but, he's passed now. So Sirajuddin Haqqani essentially is the current Qasem Soleimani. The U.S. government's underestimating him, but he's playing all sides. He works with Al-Qaeda, he works with ISIS, he works with Iran, he talks to us, he talks to Russia. So he's playing and China. So he is playing all the great powers and all the terrorist leaders. He's a very dangerous individual.
Yeah,
and much better than I can.
and how long has he been since his father died?
Oh gosh, when did Jalaluddin die?
It's been a while.
Maybe 10 years?
Yeah.
Okay. And as we record this, yesterday is the 3rd-year anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombings. How long has he been since his father died? 10 years. Okay. And as we record this, yesterday is the 3rd-year anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombings. 10 years. Okay. And as we record this, yesterday is the 3rd-year anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombings. So for people that said that they didn't see this coming, you guys said pretty much you could see that 10 miles away. It's coming. This was published yesterday for the anniversary as well. I printed it out. So this is I'm assuming that's Haqqani, Know Thy Enemy, right?
It's actually, that's the airport code at the time for Kabul International Airport. It was Hamid Karzai International Airport. So, and we all call it HKIA on the ground.
I see. And you guys published this yesterday. I'll be putting a link to this for those listening and watching. It's on the show notes to accompany this episode at theandresegovia.com, and I'll post it on the social medias as well. This is your call to action to get these terrorists that did this on at least on the FBI watch list. Of course, we want justice, but the FBI watch list, because as a supposed retaliatory attack for what happened, we targeted an innocent family.
Yeah, and the thing is, the biggest issue is our government has been lying to the American people in saying this was only an ISIS attack when it was a joint ISIS-Taliban Haqqani attack. So they're downplaying, just like Benghazi. Remember in Benghazi, they lied and said it wasn't Al-Qaeda, it was just Ansar Sharia. They're doing the exact same thing as Benghazi, and that's why we decided to get involved. And we actually investigated that attack ourselves inside Afghanistan. So that info in that report does not come from the U.S. government. That was personally collected by Benghazi Know Thy Enemy to show the American people they're not just lying to you about the Haqqanis, right? The Haqqanis were involved in every aspect of this, to include planning the attack, recruiting the suicide bomber, moving the suicide bomber, getting the suicide bomber through the gates. And then it was a Haqqani at the end that told him, to detonate. That's how involved they were. And our government is not being honest about it. And it's very frustrating, right, to lose 13 people, and our government won't even tell the parents truthfully who did it.
And just take it a step further after the fact too, just to show that we did something. We did a strike on an innocent, and then said, hey, we actually did a strike on ISIS, where in fact we killed an NGO worker and 7 kids. And then we sat on that information for about 19 days before we actually fessed up, because a reporter reported that, hey, that wasn't in fact an ISIS attacker that you bombed. The government was kind of forced to say, okay, we hit the wrong target. And then we just kind of forget about it, and it goes away, and no one brings it up anymore.
And just 2 weeks after Abbey Gate, one of the key, so basically there's 2 masterminds. There's Sirajuddin Haqqani, who we just talked about, and Sanaullah Ghaffari, who runs the ISIS Khorasan branch. Well, just 2 weeks after the attack, Sanaullah Ghaffari was captured in Afghanistan, and Sirajuddin Haqqani had him released. And the U.S. government hasn't even been honest with the American people that he was even captured.
Wow. A question popped up in my head because of other instances where Al-Qaeda has been involved and it was downplayed. Why would the government downplay Al-Qaeda's involvement?
So remember, at the time, the presidential election was going on, and one of the key talking points is Al-Qaeda's on the run. We've defeated Al-Qaeda. So then to have Al-Qaeda carry out, basically the Benghazi was Al-Qaeda's largest attack by the number of attackers, right? So there was over 150 terrorists. Hamas now blew that out of the water. But the magnitude of that attack obviously proved Al-Qaeda has not gotten anywhere, and they've only gotten stronger, right? So they had to keep it under wraps for the elections.
Of course. Not politically expedient, of course. Damn, well, see, I don't even know what to say, or I don't even have a good segue for that. I guess this next one is kind of touching on Afghanistan, because it's, was it Pakistan? Oh my goodness, I'm losing it. Where did we capture bin Laden or take him out? It was Pakistan, wasn't it? Pakistan. Okay. So you had a Twitter bout, Sarah. I forget who these individuals were. I guess they're supposed to be other journalists or whatever. And it was with respect. Was it it was like a surviving son, I think. I don't know if it was bin Laden's son or someone. And they're saying that you were sourcing someone named Guido, who was supposedly discredited. And you were parroting some of his things, and that's where they were coming at you, where you're sourcing things. I believe you know what I'm talking about, but for the audience, can you give us a rundown of what that Twitter exchange was all about?
Yeah, basically, there's an individual on Twitter, Guido, and he has a lot of jealousy against him. He's actually like a counterterrorism hero. I mean, I won't say what he did, but he's very famous in our world. But there's people jealous of him in his country, and there's a guy who makes up a bunch of fake accounts and pretends he's him, and then he collects money pretending he's him and rips people off. So anyway, he's a fraudster, right? He's a guy, he served in Afghanistan, and he frauds people. He runs fake NGOs. He sells Guido's book in a secret way. Anyway, there's a lot of fraudsters around Afghanistan. It's unbelievable how many people run an NGO, right? So obviously, when we talked about Osama bin Laden's sons being alive, this individual, this fraudster, assumed we got the information from Guido and started discrediting Guido, but actually our information on Osama bin Laden's sons isn't from Guido. So it's just he doesn't even actually understand that we have direct access to the bin Ladens, right? It's just he's not on the ground. He served years ago in a Ruzgan, province. He was, it was some sort of NATO soldier. He doesn't have access to anything. So there's a lot of people on Twitter, right, who make assumptions that they know where you get information from, and they just don't, and they're not going to know, right? We are never going to share our sources.
And just to clarify, the real Guido is a legitimate source.
Okay.
The other Guido who says he's the real Guido who isn't, it's the one that we're talking about, who's a scamster.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
He assumed the same name to use that to discredit him, I guess.
Oh, he's made about 20 different accounts in his name, and every time Twitter takes him down, he makes another one. It's a frustrating thing, but you can only do so much about it.
Okay, and what is the significance? Well, I can venture a guess here, but what is the significance of Osama bin Laden's sons being alive? Is it that because they're actively involved in terror cells?
Yeah, one, obviously you understand the historical lineage that bin Laden would actually still be in charge of Al-Qaeda. Two, Hamza bin Laden was reported being killed by the U.S. government, which in fact, he's not dead at all. So it's just more bad BDA and false reporting from the U.S. government.
Yeah, and remember, when we made the Doha deal with the Taliban, they basically said he was dead and he was alive. Now, if you actually talk about the person we made the Doha deal with, Mullah Barader's daughter is married to Mullah Yaqub, who's the son of Mullah Omar. Mullah Omar's daughter is married to Hamza bin Laden. So they are all family. So when we made the Doha deal with the Taliban, we also made the Doha deal with the bin Laden family.
Well, there you go. There's the connections. So, and I hear you talk about this on other podcasts, and still, it's just, it's always mind-boggling that, first off, we keep repeating history. How is it that we haven't learned from these things? I don't know. Incompetence, I guess, or something. It's just, it is mind-boggling. But for those that are following along with everything here, this is an investigation that you guys have been doing, and I think you guys were about a decade just on Benghazi, no enemy, and since then, in the 2 years since you published the book, the investigation hasn't stopped. If anything, there's updates to the book, but an active investigation that y'all are spearheading pretty much, and I'm glad that now bigger platforms, including what Sean Ryan's platform, has taken off in the past year, which is pretty awesome. And I'm glad that those currents finally have you, Sarah, because you're pretty much the first contributor to his newsletter, and this information is going to get out there. But at the same time, it's like, unless you read the comments on his YouTube videos, it's like, guys, it's not about her. She's not after the fame. Are you listening to what she's saying? She's not a pretty face just saying things. She's speaking things that you need to be paying attention to. It's like there's still that. Now there's a reach, but even people that are supposed to be on our side are just not getting it. After your first appearance, people were talking about Benghazi. They were complaining that you weren't talking about Clinton. I'm like, did you not hear a thing she said?
Painful. Also, who's going to call up the Secretary of State if they want to be saved? Really, you must be the dumbest human on earth. I'll call up Eric Prince before I call the Secretary of State to come rescue me. Like, people are like lunatics.
I know, and that's And I think that's also the fault of people that for the ineffective action. Even Sean Ryan, I gotta mention this and shout out to Sean Ryan for doing what he does. But with Masood, and he had that petition to circle out there, and he highlighted how many people tuned into the interview, and how many people participated in the petition.
All we hear is, "What can we do? We're outraged. When are we going to stand up to this?" Well, we answered that, and we gave you a call to action, and it was to sign the petition. Now, that episode has 650,000 views on YouTube. Go ahead and double that on audio, Spotify and Apple. So there's 1.3 million, plus all the clips, reels, posts that we've done across all our social media channels, which all together is probably sitting at about 5.5 to 6 million views. That's how many people have heard about this. And we heard all the outrage, how everybody's so upset. Do you know how many people signed that petition? 63,000. Less than 1% of the people that watched the video or heard the podcast or saw the reels took the time out of their day to sign the petition.
That in a nutshell speaks to the level of all this. It's like they'll build outrage and it looks like there's some social media actions gonna be taken. No, they're just shouting into the ether, kind of like therapy, and then they just move on. That's the reason I keep talking about Benghazi. Is when we did the 13 hours fact check, which was really awesome. Thank you for being a part of it. The people that went in with one mindset that have seen the movie and to come out of it with a completely different perspective. That's basically why I do this, and not just to the extent that why y'all do this, but it's for the mission, it's for the justice. I mean, that's the whole payoff for the investigation is to bring these guys to justice. And when you haven't mentioned probably 1,500 from Afghanistan alone that has crossed our border, and let me ask you this: how would you know that estimation if they're not on the FBI watch list? How would you know if they're terrorists? Let me throw that
I
back
know
at you.
because I'm also tracking the terrorist camps. So the really interesting thing is the Libyan terrorists who've now returned to Afghanistan since the fall of Kabul are some of the key trainers in Afghanistan. So there's two different training structures. The Libyans either stay at a training camp all the time. So like there's a very famous urban warfare training camp in Helmand. Or they rotate camp to camp to camp. So if I'm tracking Libyans, right, I need to know where they go at all times. So obviously I'm paying attention to the camps, and it was at 42 camps, but as of last week, Al-Qaeda added 3 more. So Al-Qaeda now has 45 affiliated training camps in Afghanistan. So mathematically, of course, when you look at how many people are training, and then remember, Al-Qaeda has a homeland plot that we've been talking about, and one of our Benghazi plotters is working Al-Qaeda's homeland plot, right? So we also are collecting on Al-Qaeda's homeland plot, and that is they're basically one of their main external operation focuses right now.
I wanted to move on to this other question, but let me ask you this because that's very interesting. Why Afghanistan, though? Why does Afghanistan seem to be the hotbed breeding ground for terrorists?
Well, it's kind of like why it was the base, which is what Al-Qaeda means in the first place. It's because it allows a safe haven where they can train and they can operate and they can plan without any consequences. That the government supports terrorists being there. Sarah was talking about the intermarriages, like with Hamza bin Laden, with Mullah Omar. So Mullah Omar is dead, but Mullah Omar is actually the one who started the Taliban. So you see how they're connected. The Taliban is connected to Al-Qaeda historically, and why it's such a threat. But because we left Afghanistan and we left that void, we created another safe haven for terrorists from all over the world to operate, train, and plan freely. Kind of like the same thing that happened to Benghazi.
But in Benghazi, they only had like 2 terrorist training camps. I'm saying 45. So I really hope people understand the magnitude.
Okay, so why the hell have we not treated Afghanistan like Iran? How many terrorist camps does Iran have? Do you know?
Well, I don't know how many they have in Iran, but Iran now also has Quds Force training camps in Afghanistan.
Okay. Well, see, the point is that they don't. I don't believe they have them in Iran. They have them elsewhere, but we sanction Iran and we fund Afghanistan. So
We also fund Iran.
well, and we also fund Iran. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just how interesting that Trump puts a freeze to these funds, and I think it was Qatar, and Biden unfreezes it. Not even a year later, we got October 7th in Israel by Hamas. It's just, my goodness, the whole thing just.
And remember, a number of the Hamas attackers came to Afghanistan and they trained. So when I talk about the urban warfare camp, Hamas trained in that camp. The Al-Qaeda homeland attackers that have come to the United States have also trained in the camp. So they have the same training as Hamas. So if people think, oh, what happened in Israel isn't going to happen here when they have the exact same training, you're living in some la-la land.
And that reminded me of something I thought I might bring up, so I might as well just bring it up now. Life imitates art. And when you and I were talking about Afghanistan, I think it was last year already, crazy, on the program, you talked about how one of the seasons of Homeland was very much in line about what was happening. Like, yeah, that's almost like predicting what was occurring. The showrunners of that show, half of them were part of the team that made 24. So 24 was before Homeland for Fox. And I love that show, by the way. I still do. And the season that most people deride as jumping the shark is season 6. And I recently gave it a visit with my wife about a month ago. And I say, hey, I want to watch the first few episodes again, because if I recall, it was the scariest realization of what could be in America. So for everybody that doesn't remember that, we're fans of 24, but just because you might have jumped the shark season 6. The season starts off with another terrorist attack on American soil, and this is just the latest in a series of attacks that have been occurring in United States soil.
They've been targeted by a series of terror attacks.
Almost 1,000 civilians are dead.
Once again, the streets are flooded with blood.
If we don't stop these attacks, this country will never recover.
24.
Now I'm finding out that at least 1,500 alone from Afghanistan might have crossed our border. Not to mention a bunch of other ones. Some of them were caught on video saying, I'm very famous. You remember my face. You will know my name. It's like, what the flip?
By the way, if you are smart enough, you will know who I am. But you are really not smart enough to know who I am. But soon you're going to know who I am. Very easy.
Wow, very easy. The entitlement.
It's like, I do fear that the season 6 of 24 could be a very, very real thing. And it's just a matter of someone just getting the call and saying, go ahead and do it. It's just, that is what should freak us out the most. And you did share some things on a previous podcast about like what preparedness people can take. And you coming from a Florida perspective, I feel like I'm coming more from a California perspective. Well, this is going to be an earthquake. It happens. Oh, well, it's already happened. But if people were to have some kind of situational awareness, if you will, what signs can they be looking for?
When you talk about situational awareness, it's really situational, spatial, and environmental awareness that you really need. But when you talk about signs, so they're just everyday things that we would look for where something isn't right. One thing by itself could be nothing, but 2, 3, 4 things together, in law enforcement, we call it clue. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing like in particular that would say, hey, that's terrorism attack's going to happen. It's just having a baseline. What's the baseline for this environment? Now, what's different about this? What doesn't fit in this baseline? And those are things you can look for, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. No, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, because preparing for a hurricane is one thing. You know it's coming, and you usually see it coming. But over here in California, I was like, man, we've had record earthquakes this year. I gotta tell you,
right.
And I told the wife, like, the big one's coming. But yeah, that's how I kind of see these things. But having y'all been in the midst of all this to look for signs, that's like, well, who best to kind of tell Americans, like, hey, just look for, I guess, pattern recognition or unrecognition. If that doesn't fit, something else is up.
When we say like a baseline, we'll look for suspicious activity. Well, what's suspicious? If I'm in the hood, everything looks suspicious. But if I live there, it's just normal. So yeah. What's normal? What's your baseline for your environment? And then what stands out for that particular environment? and it's always going to be evolving depending on what environment you're in. So it's hard to say, well, look for this, look for that. Well, in a certain environment, that might be perfectly normal. For instance, when it comes to active shooters, a lot of law enforcement will say, well, look for heavy clothing, look for trench coats, look for hoodies. Well, here in Florida, every teenager wears a hoodie, even though it's 90 degrees out. Like, that's not vicious for this environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do remember, like, there were some discussions around the fact that, like, kind of near the border with Israel, a lot of phones were popping up that hadn't been before. Like, something like that is a sign, right? If there's now a bunch of phones in the area that hadn't been there before, kind of, outside your border, maybe it's something you need to look into. Again, something completely new, right? Completely different. You have to watch for those telltale signs, because it's really the only way you're going to be proactive, right? You have to be alert to something different happening.
Yeah. And it does feel like, just like you've been spearheading these investigations, not the U.S. government, you guys, that we kind of have to be self-reliant in a way. Just to give people context here, can you remind the audience who the FBI signaled as the mastermind for the Benghazi attacks?
Yeah, they called a terrorist named Ahmed Abu Khattala the mastermind of the attacks, and he wasn't. So they got it wrong.
Okay.
Not only was he not an attacker, he was a looter. So during the time that we were actually on the compound, he was not physically there. He showed up much later once we actually left the compound. So he was a looter. He was not an attacker.
So let me ask you this then, because this also came up, and I think it's relevant to the discussion. There was a plea deal for what we call the masterminds of 9/11. Who spearheaded that investigation? Was it also the FBI?
Well, I mean, the FBI was part of it, but I think the Department of Justice has had him under kind of their wing for a while, because remember, they were held in Gitmo, so it was a whole military trial process. It's not a normal trial like, Khattala, for example. They snatched him on the ground, they rendered him to United States. He went through like the federal judicial process. The military process is like different.
Interesting. Okay. Because then we lack trust in our institutions because our institutions did it to themselves. But how do we trust? How do we trust them to get this right? That they're gonna hopefully put these guys on the watch list and do something about it, instead of we had these shooters in our radar for about a year and did nothing about it.
I don't have any confidence. I was having a conversation today actually with someone who actually provided tips to the FBI of real Haqqani members in the United States, and they did nothing. Last fall, I provided information related to ISIS, specific info that would be available to them that could be collected that a person was willing to give them, and I never even got a response. We've named numerous times that, remember I said the Libyan plotter from our attack working in the U.S. Homeland attack, we tried to provide that to the government to have them get ahead of the Homeland attack. No one ever responded to us on that, and nobody's looking into them. Do you have opinions?
Actually, the reality is that, there's going to have to be another 9/11 before people take it serious. Within law enforcement, there's policy, and we usually say that policy is usually written with blood. And what that means is that once something goes bad, then they do something corrective to attempt to fix it. There's nothing that is going to happen preemptively until a tragedy happens. And then it's that typical knee-jerk reaction. Just like with 9/11. Right after 9/11, you had all the resources you wanted, and it didn't last very long.
Right. And, we just talked about, the Abbey Gate anniversary being yesterday. So there's basically 12 people involved in that plot, at least, one being the suicide bomber. So the 11 have basically not ever been watch listed for being involved in Abbey Gate. 3 of them, about 2 months after Abbey Gate, were put on a sanctions list. The U.S. government didn't even explain to the public why they were being sanctioned. They just said, these 3 senior ISKP leaders. So they're not even taking that serious. And Abbey Gate is something that affected basically an entire generation in America, right? Our entire GWAT generation was hurt by the Abbey Gate attacks. Their families were affected by it. Our allies' families were affected. So if they're going to lie about something that important to the fabric of America and not even go after those plotters, like, they're not doing their job. So I'm sorry, you can't trust them to protect you, right? There's a saying, no one's coming for you. So you have to prepare on the community level, because our government let in these Al-Qaeda terrorists who are coming here to attack us.
Yeah. I had some words to say, but I can't even say them. It's all wild. Yeah, I'm going to do some editing on this episode. A lot of these, you're keeping me speechless here.
This is how our meals are every night. Like, you should hear our conversation.
Oh, I bet. How you stay sane is just, cheers to you. I don't know how you keep it together, and how all these names are not tongue twisters to you.
They are for me.
Yeah. But I had two thoughts I was going to share, and like I can't even share them because I don't even know. It's like not anymore. But I guess to put a cap on it all, because I want to respect your time as well. It's just it does feel like you said, no one's coming to save us. And was it always like that though? Was it always like that much incompetence?
So we've had a debate about this because where I came from in the military, I had a different perspective, and it always seemed like we always did the right thing. We were always prepared. We always answered the call. And Sarah's like, no, the military's not like that. And it's not anymore. And then we started looking into it deeper and like, wait a minute. If you really start looking at it, going all the way back to even the 60s, we've never really been prepared. We've been lucky, but we've never really been prepared. So it has always been this way. It's just the flow of information now. It's more widely available. So now we see it more, where back in the day, we just didn't realize it because we weren't privy to a lot of those things. But no, we've never been prepared. We've never been ready. It's always been like this.
And we were having a discussion earlier today. This politicalization of intelligence, right, is the hugest problem affecting our preparedness, affecting the truth, even affecting intelligence collection, right? If they don't make something a priority, we're not collecting on it. And so, we were discussing, we mostly saw this happening around Benghazi, right? To us, that was one of the first times. But actually, when you go and talk to people who worked in Iraq, there's the book called The Targeter by Nada Bakos. She talks about experiencing that working Iraq, right? So it even was happening back then. And so when these politicians are getting involved in our intelligence community, our law enforcement, our military, and pushing an idea and a thought process and an assessment on the people who are supposed to provide them assessments, it's very, very dangerous. And it is where the incompetence is coming from.
Yeah, and that's just it's something along the lines of what I do. Is whenever I research something, I always tell, whenever I give an opinion, I should say, I always tell people, research this on your own. It's evolved a lot over time, especially with the big tech oligarchs getting involved and changing the flow of information. And the big news yesterday that the GOP Judiciary Committee got a letter from Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, basically admitting to stuff that we already knew. As a digital content creator, and I'm sure you guys know this too, we get to see things that people don't get to see. So they can easily write us off as like, we're cookie fringe, or just, seeing things that aren't really there. It's like, it's not a freaking mirage, man. I'm telling you, it's right here. It's in the numbers. And one of the things that we already knew but always bothered me was not only did big tech suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story in October 2020 in the lead up to an election, it was the fact that the FBI took them off weeks to even months ahead of time, already calling it Russian disinformation. So when the news was circulated, because you couldn't keep it silent for too long, then you had at least 40 intelligence officials signing a letter saying that this was Russian disinformation. And since then, this was proven that the laptop was proven correct. And it wasn't just one laptop, for people that are not aware, so probably at least 3. So after that, one of them even up to recently defended his signature, saying, I did my patriotic duty. Who the hell are these people that we're supposed to be relying on for the central intelligence? That's really what bothers me. And those, I'm assuming, would be the ones that are just political positions that they got in there.
I mean, in my opinion, if you don't have direct access to something, you can't make an assessment on it. And most of that people on that letter never even worked in Russia House, which I think is ironic. But anyway, so the point is, if you're going to sign a letter like that, then you better have direct access, right? Especially when you're saying you were a CIA officer. I mean, we take that very serious, right? When we put out Benghazi, know thy enemy, right? There's not one man in there we got wrong, right? Because we know as CIA officers, if we say, Mohammed X did the attacks, people are going to believe it, right? And we just did the same thing when we did the Abbey Gate attacks, right? Like, our words matter even when we leave the agency, and there is some sort of moral responsibility to that. And to influence elections when you don't actually have any background information, I do think is dangerous, and I think it's wrong, and they shouldn't have done it.
Yeah. And that's why I hope that more people listen to y'all, which is why I appreciate you guys, your willingness to be on my program, and there's always an open door for you to show up, to get the word out, and to inform the general public about, sometimes countering what's being said out there, especially during a hot political season like it is this year. And as we wind down here, two things. One, where they can continue to support your work and find it, and what you want people listening to do on their part. Can you tell us that?
I'll go first. Well, first, we were talking about Zuckerberg's letter and the censorship. One of the things I want people to understand, like, my personal Facebook is marked as support for dangerous organizations. And then our Instagram, Askari Media Group, I can't even remember. It's been 6, 7, 8, 9 months that it can't be shown to non-followers. So unless you go find us, you can't follow us. So they're limiting even us putting out accurate information on terrorism. I mean, think about that. Now, if you're actually in a more political space, which we both think both parties are screwing up this country, you're probably limited even more, Yes. So, if you can follow us on social media, great. If you can find us. But one of the things we're focused on right now is, you talked about watch listening our Benghazi attackers. We've kind of given up on that part. We've even tried Republican members of Congress. Nobody's biting because they don't want to touch Benghazi. But now we want to get these Abbey Gate plotters put on FBI's most wanted list and put in the rewards for justice and put bounties on their head, right? You need to be honest about who these terrorists are, because also when we put sanctions against them, it'll be more laws or governments breaking when they're sending money to the Taliban, right? Like, we need to put roadblocks in place to stop our own government from funding the terrorists, especially the terrorists killing, obviously, our soldiers. So yeah, that's what we want people to do. Write your Congress people and say that you want the Abbey Gate plotters put on the watch list. That's the most important thing to us right now.
Yeah, I agree with everything she said. And just so your listeners understand, why do we still talk about Benghazi? Because it does still matter. Because our investigation started in Benghazi, and it's taken us to Afghanistan. Yeah. So what we're really about is catching terrorists and killing terrorists. That's what we're about. Whether it's in Benghazi, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Afghanistan, we don't care. That's our drive, is to bring terrorists to justice. So why does Benghazi still matter? Because we had a chance to bring them to justice and we failed. And they're still continuing to victimize people all throughout the world. Now that safe haven is in Afghanistan.
I'm going to leave the links to all your social medias on the show notes, as is the case. And I was not aware that the Askari group was not available to non-followers. At least they couldn't find it in that way. So I'll be sure to parrot it even more. But the Askari Media Group, that's basically the Know Thy Enemy account on X, right? Okay, to making sure those are the two being mirrored there.
Yeah, and X is called Benghazi Attacks.
Benghazi Attacks. Yes.
And that's the same as Askari Media Group on Instagram.
Okay, yeah, I want to make sure I have those, because then there's Boon. You're on X as of, I think, July or June. So
yeah, he's like quietly on there. There's no photo yet, but we'll get him there. He's a shadow
warrior there. I noticed.
I'm out there observing.
He's like, Sarah, did you see what this person said about you? That's what he's doing.
Well, he's got to go. He's got to protect you like he's always done. So, but I will definitely post those up. And as you guys all know, I'm also across multiple other social media, about like 12 others. So I'm putting your stuff out there too, especially this one. I can't say that. HKIA?
HKIA.
HKIA.
But you could just call it Abbey Gate. It's an investigation to the Abbey Gate attack. Is the easy way to say it.
Okay. Yeah. And for those that are interested, the book Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy is still available. Are there still autographed copies available too?
Yeah, you can get those off our website, skymedia.com.
Okay. And this entire thing... Yeah, and this entire thing has been self-funded, so some of the purchases of the book help towards the funding. But that's pretty much been your sole way. Do you have a donation page?
We don't, because we didn't want people to think we're in it for the money. So even when we just did the Abbey Gate investigation, we did that free to give to the families that have been impacted by Abbey Gate. So we decided not to print it in book form and sell it in that way. We just wanted to make it a free resource. Even Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, it's only available to sell so we can fund our investigation. But, it only funds about 5% of our investigation. So we just self-fund all the work we do in Libya and all the work we do in Afghanistan.
Well, we appreciate what you guys are doing and keep on doing it. So, like I said, the microphone here is always open. I don't see you guys bad-mouthing Batman anytime soon. So, I think you guys are fans. So, the door's open. Otherwise, badmouth Batman and you might get put on the blacklist. I'm just kidding. But,
he likes Batman.
I do have a question for you.
He's my comic book guy.
You have a question for me?
Yes, a nerdy question.
Ask me.
Who wins, Batman or Iron Man?
Come on. Batman would have hacked Iron Man a long time ago. It's like Jarvis got nothing on him. Alfred, he's gonna get Alfred. No, seriously though, the password is Iron Man sucks.
What is the password?
Iron Man sucks.
Thank you.
But for everybody else, that is definitely where we'll leave it. I'll leave the socials to show notes accompanying this episode at theunderscovet.com and support their work. Websites and all those links I'll be putting there too. I believe you all share the same link tree, so I'll leave that link tree link as well. I would be on Linktree and link your stuff, except that I'm banned from Linktree, so I can't do that.
We're on the Bitly one now or whatever, because Linktree took us down saying we violated their terms of agreement. So yeah, we moved to the Bitly one. And then of course I put in a request and complaint, and then they reversed it, right? But I was like, screw it, I'm not using your company anymore.
Yeah. The two appeals I've only ever won. One was a YouTube thing, and the other one didn't matter because at that point nobody watched it anymore. But the other one was Tumblr. They had taken my account down, and after about a week they restored it. So I'm like, oh, thank you. So ever since then they haven't bothered me. And seriously, thank you for your service. I really do appreciate this. I'll let you guys have the last word for the audience.
I mean, my dog just realized it's dinner time, so now he's making the noises that we need to feed him. So it's up to you.
Speechless.
Of course.
No, thanks for having us again. And, we're happy to get the info out. But it really shouldn't be our jobs, right? We're getting to be quite middle-aged. We'd like to see the next generation step up and have more respect for this country and to protect it.
And that does it for this episode of the Andres Segovia Show. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the know. Follow me across the socials at the Andres Segovia on X_Andres Segovia. Anything and everything about me is over at theandressegovia.com. I'll see you on the next one.